So we really like where the characters are looking. The way the world looks, the way the characters look, the special effects, all of that stuff, that's all coming along really well. We're very happy with where it is. But none of those things are what make this game different than any other game you've ever played before. We have this set of things that I call Holy Grails. And these are things that we have always wanted to put into a virtual world, an MMO. And, well, you know, there's lots of reasons why we didn't do these things: lack of resources, lack of time, maybe lack of intestinal fortitude. Whatever it was, we never got around to putting these things in. And so what I'm going to do right now is go through the series of 4 different Grails and show you exactly why they make a huge difference in our game. And the first Grail that I want to talk about is changing the core game. And what that means is, well, let's put it this way. For 35 years, we've been playing a lot of Dungeons & Dragons. I mean a lot of it. And when I say Dungeons & Dragons, what I mean by that is the core game of that is basically you pick a class, you go out and kill stuff, and unlock a tech tree of abilities, and we've all done that a lot of different times. So we didn't want to just reboot the lore and reboot the way the world looked and maybe add some new adventures. What we wanted to do was give you a whole new gaming experience that you could discover and explore as you played the game. And so to start that, we're embracing a new concept which we call multi-classing. Oh, you haven't heard it yet. What multi-classing is when you start the game, there's 8 different classes that you can pick from. Each class has a couple of weapons that you can choose and a handful of character abilities that go with it. And then as you go out into the world and you start exploring, as you do adventures and as you talk to different NPCs, you'll find opportunities to acquire new classes, to collect all these different classes that are out there. And there's more than 40 or so classes out there in the world for you to explore and find. And as you find those classes, you can play any of them at any time, and you can mix and match the different character abilities to create a class that's exactly what you want to play. So the more classes you find, the more you can customize your character. Now, your weapons make a big difference. They're one of the class-defining things in the game. So as you go through and you find these different classes, each class has a couple of weapons. Let's say, for example, that you pick the warrior. The warrior has like a big halberd and a longsword. And when he uses the halberd, he can use these big room-sweeping clearing attacks, or he can slam the half down on the ground and create a shockwave. But when he switches to the longsword, his abilities change. And he can then basically be able to attack a single thing and do a lot of damage, or perhaps do some melee blocks and parries. So depending upon what class you pick, your weapons will change to fit that class, and the abilities on those weapons are different. So as you change classes, you will also change your core gameplay, and you will constantly be exploring as you move through this game. And we have a lot of weapons. In fact, one of the things that you'll find as you go through and you start advancing your characters is that you can mix and match little pieces on those weapons to actually change what they do. And in fact, it's a very visual thing, and when we get around to talking about crafting, you'll see that the crafters have a lot to do with this game. Well, let's go through that for now. Okay, so we've talked about these abilities. Now it's time to see some of them in action. So let's start with the human wizard, Jelena. That's a chromosphere. Now, once in a while, she'll get bushwhacked and need to get out of dodge. So she has a vortex ability. And what the vortex does is it slaps all the enemies into the same spot she was, teleports her backwards, and then blows them up. Let's take a look at the warrior abilities also. Check in with Kishar. Now, Kishar has something I'm going to talk a little bit because he's quite loud. I'll talk a little bit. He has this really cool ability called Unstoppable Force, which is a charge attack. And it looks like this. And then that's Forceful Blow. Now, he also has a Shield Bash, which is great for knocking opponents back in an arc in front of him. It's also handy for sweeping up corpses. So anyway, that's some of the abilities in the game. And so that's the way the dynamic look of the game is. That's the way the special effects look and everything like that. And it kind of ties us over to Grail number 2. Now, Grail number 2 is something we have always wanted to do. As designers and game developers, there's never been a time in my 25 years of building games where we did not have this conversation at least once when we were starting a game. We wanted to be able to blow up anything, anytime, anywhere. So we built the entire world out of little teeny pieces called voxels. And we can literally blow up anything, anytime, anywhere. So the second Grail is destructibility, and it changes everything in the game. I'm going to show you some examples of how that looks. But first I want to briefly mention that because everything is made out of voxels, we can not only destroy those voxels, we can also build them up on the fly with constructability. And that allows us to create all kinds of special abilities for the different classes. For instance, the human wizard has something called a crystal wall. And you can see that she can erect voxels straight out of the ground. Now the kobolds need to break that down. And when they do, she'll need to stop them by using upheaval. And upheaval can destroy bridges, you can block staircases, all kinds of different things. Now, she's not the only one that can do this kind of thing. In fact, the warrior has one of my favorite abilities in the game called Whirlwind. Now, he's going to leap over that chasm and do some damage. So that's destructibility, and it changes an amazing amount of stuff in the game. Because not only is it fun to just rip the crap out of a battlefield, but it's also amazing what we can do with scenarios at that point too. You can imagine a player versus player scenario where one side is protecting a castle and the other side has catapults, and they're destroying the keep and trying to get into the courtyard. Or perhaps like a player versus environment scenario, where perhaps there's a floating island moving through space, and if it gets somewhere bad, it's going to be bad for everybody around, so the players are literally trying to destroy it as it moves. This kind of destructibility allows us to create a game experience you've never had before. But it's still only Grail number 2. So, let's talk about Grail number 3. Grail number 3 is what we call a life of consequence. And what it really means is that we completely redid the way AI works in our game. But first, before we get to that, as you play this game, you're going to be making decisions. And those decisions will have consequences. What that means is the game is remembering everything you did. And it's reacting. The different NPCs, what quest opportunities are available, all those things are reacting to you based on what you have done. But it also changes what we can do inside the game, and that's where we get to talking about emergent AI. Now, the best and the easiest way for me to describe how that AI works is to run you through an example. So here's a concept piece of something we all know and love, Crushbone. Now, Crushbone's full of orcs. So let's take a look at the way orcs look in our game. That's an orc. Okay, now we all know a lot about orcs. They are what they are. But basically, they really want to get a lot of gold, and they want to do things that are really nasty to us. We know what they don't like is cities. They don't like to be around cities because cities have guards. And guards are just something that will always be bad for orcs. What they do like are lonely stretches of road where the occasional adventurer will walk by with a fat purse, and they can knock them over the head and take everything they own. Now, we know also that they don't like getting their butts kicked. It happens a lot, but they don't like it, okay? So that's the way we set up everything in our game. Now, in a normal MMO, you'd come out here, we would set up a static spawn camp next to that lonely road, and it doesn't matter whether it's launch day or 10 years after launch, you're gonna walk down that road, and there's gonna be that orc spawn camp, and every 15 minutes they're gonna spit out a new batch of orcs. That's the way these games have worked for a long time. But our game is different. What we do is we tag everything in the world with what it is. The game is constantly polling the world to find out where the guards are, how often people have gone down a lonely stretch of road to find out whether it's lonely or not. And so what we do is we create orcs, and then we just release them into the world. And then it's up to the orcs to find the spots that they like. And so when they find that lonely stretch of road where there's no guards, they set up a camp. And they're going to stay in that camp, waylaying the occasional adventurer until one of a couple of things happens. The players might go to a city and alert the guards, and the guards might start patrolling down the road. That would be something the orcs don't like. The adventurers might stop going down the road, in which case there's no gold going back and forth, and the orcs don't like that either. Or the players might kick them around a lot. And they don't like that either. Either way, they're going to uproot stakes and they're going to start wandering around the world trying to find the things that they do like instead of the things they don't like. And when they find that spot, they're going to put down stakes again and start harassing people. Now that allows you, the players, to make absolute change in the world. As we tell you to go out on quests to do things like pacify the woods because there's nasty goblins in them, you can actually do it. You go out into the woods and you harass those goblins and push them back until eventually they don't want to be there anymore and they leave. Now it might not have the consequences you expected. You might go out there to pacify them and make the woods safe, but what might actually happen is that you tick off the Goblin King and he starts sending war bands to start pushing back at you. So you don't know what's going to be set up, and that's a big part of the game. So as you go through and you try to do things, the world will be reacting to what you've done, and you will be making change. Now that was a lot of talking, so let's see some more action. This is a combat scene where Jelena and Kishar are going to fight against an earth elemental. Players fall down the hole. So, okay, what you just saw is actually reasonably common in our game. There's all kinds of different areas where stuff like that might happen because of destructibility. You see, because we're not just building a surface world this time. We're building a world that has many, many, many tiers of depth to it. And in fact, it looks like this. So what we do is we procedurally create. Go ahead. What we do is we procedurally create all this fantastic content that's all the way through the world. And we know where everything is. We know where all the lost temples are in the ancient cities and all of that stuff. Because we have thousands and thousands and thousands of years of lore and archaeology that the designers have been building over this time. We know where everything is. We have all kinds of lore, and you'll be seeing a lot more of that when you go to the panels. But what that means is, as you explore through all these tiers of depth and stuff in the world, you're going to uncover all these dynamic quest opportunities. And as you explore through them and you choose what you want to do, and remember, the world is destructible, so you don't have to wait for us to reveal it to you. You can just pick up a pick and start making a tunnel. You can just explore through this whole area organically whenever you want to. And as you explore through this and you find these different quest opportunities, occasionally we'll have earthquakes or events in those quest opportunities will collapse caverns and stuff like that, and we'll recreate new areas procedurally. So as you explore through the world, it's constantly changing and you're constantly finding new content. And just as an example of that, let's go back to Kishar and Jelena, whatever her name is, Jelena, and re-get together with them while they're in the center of the world. Now, they couldn't find their way out, so they're just going to basically blow a hole in the crust below, and what they're going to find is a magma chamber. And that's Avoid Goliath.